I drove 1,000 miles just to see my grandson, but when I arrived, the door was slammed in my face. My own son wouldn't let me in, and I was left standing on the porch heartbroken, wondering if I had lost my family forever. What happened next changed everything, but only after I faced the hardest truth of my life. If you've ever felt rejected by someone you love, or fought to be part of your family, this story is for you. Stay with me because this isn't just about heartbreak. It's about courage, love, and the fight to reclaim what matters most. The road stretched out before me like a ribbon that never seemed to end, miles of cracked highway winding through quiet towns I hadn't even heard of before. I'd been driving for 14 hours straight. 14 hours to see a face I hadn't seen in almost 5 years. My grandson. Just saying those words to myself made my throat tighten. He was only a baby the last time I held him. Soft little curls, round cheeks, the kind of smile that makes you forget everything else in the world. The engine hummed beneath me, steady but tired like me. I kept both hands tight on the steering wheel, my knuckles white. A sign on the side of the road told me I was less than 100 miles away now. My heart started beating faster. 100 miles. That's all that separated me from finally being a grandmother again. I whispered under my breath, "You're almost there, Marie. Don't lose your nerve now." I had rehearsed this moment in my head 1,000 times. How I'd knock on the door, how he'd run up to me, how my son might smile awkwardly at first but let me in anyway. Maybe it would be weird. Maybe there'd be tears. But at least there would be something. A beginning. But underneath all that hope was something else. Fear. The kind that tightens in your chest like a fist. I hadn't spoken to my son in years, not since that argument. I can still hear his voice the night he told me I'd crossed a line. His wife had been in the background, silent but firm. We'd always had tension between us, from the moment they got married. And I'll admit I wasn't kind that day. My pride had gotten in the way. I said things I regret every single day since. But that little boy, my grandson, he didn't cause any of this. And he deserved to know that his grandmother was alive, that she loved him fiercely, even if the grown-ups had messed everything up. I shifted in my seat and reached over to the passenger side, picking up the small box wrapped in blue paper. It wasn't much, just a little toy car, the same kind my son used to love when he was a kid. I ran my thumb over the crinkled edge of the wrapping paper. I'd imagined handing it to him, seeing his eyes light up, maybe even hearing him call me Grandma for the first time. That image alone had kept me going through every mile of this long drive. A gust of wind rocked the car gently as I crossed a long bridge. My old sedan wasn't much, but it had never failed me before. I wasn't sure I could say the same about my family. I turned the radio on just to break the silence. Some old country song came through the static, the kind of tune my son used to sing along to when we'd go on road trips. He'd tap the dashboard like it was his own drum set, grinning through the window, the sun in his hair. He was just a kid then. It was just the two of us for so long. I thought we'd always be close. But time has a way of turning the simplest things complicated. He grew up, fell in love, got married, and then little by little it felt like he built a new world, one that didn't include me. The miles ticked by. 92, 81, 67. I passed gas stations, sleepy little towns with diners that looked like they hadn't changed since the 80s, and motels with flickering neon signs. But the closer I got, the heavier my chest felt. Like my hope and my fear were fighting each other for space inside me. When I finally saw the green sign with the name of his town, my breath caught. This was it. No turning back. I pulled off the highway and onto a quiet tree-lined street. The houses were big and clean, with carefully trimmed lawns and mailboxes that all seemed to match. It looked perfect. The kind of neighborhood people dream about raising kids in. My heart pinched a little. I wasn't sure I belonged here. I slowed down as I passed the house numbers, whispering them under my breath until I found theirs. 2416. It sat on the corner with white shutters and a big red door. My hands started trembling on the wheel. For a second I didn't move. I just stared at it, my eyes blurring. I could see a little bike leaning against the garage. A blue one with training wheels still attached. My heart gave a small, painful squeeze. That was his. My grandson's. He was real. He wasn't just a picture on the one Christmas card they'd sent me years ago. He lived here. I parked a few houses down, too scared to pull up right in front. I didn't want to look desperate, though the truth was I I sat in silence, listening to the ticking of the engine as it cooled down. The sky was soft gold, the late afternoon sun painting the houses in a warm glow. It should have been a beautiful moment. But all I could think about was how it could go wrong. I thought about that last phone call with my son. His voice was tight. "Mom, it's just better this way," he'd said. I'd asked what he meant by this way. He never answered. After that, he stopped picking up. I'd sent letters, birthday cards, even left messages around the holidays. Nothing. No replies. And yet here I was. I had crossed 1,000 miles with nothing but a stubborn heart and an old car. I told myself 100 times that if I didn't do this now, I might never get another chance. I wiped my palms on my jeans, took the wrapped toy car in my hand, and stepped out of the car. My knees felt a little weak as I walked toward the house. Every step made my heart beat louder, like a drum in my ears. A group of kids rode past on their bikes, laughing, shouting, being loud in the way only children can be. I smiled despite myself. My son used to be just like that. I reached the bottom of the front steps and froze. The red door looked so much bigger up close. My hand hovered in the air for a long time before I finally knocked. 3 soft knocks. I almost hoped no one would answer so I could run back to the car, pretend this was just a dream I'd had on the road. But then I heard footsteps. Someone was coming. And just like that, every memory, every mile, every ounce of hope I'd carried on this long drive collided into a single fragile moment. I whispered to myself, barely breathing, "Please, let me see him." The lock clicked. The door began to open. The door creaked open slowly, and the moment I'd imagined over and over for years finally arrived. Except it didn't feel anything like how I'd pictured it. There was no warm smile. No little boy running into my arms. No relieved son saying, "Mom, you're here." Instead, the first face I saw was hers. My daughter-in-law. She stood in the doorway with her hand on the frame, her body half blocking the entrance like a barrier. She didn't smile. She didn't even seem surprised to see me. If anything, it looked like she'd expected this, and not in a good way. Her voice was calm but sharp enough to cut. "What are you doing here?" I opened my mouth but nothing came out at first. My heart was pounding so hard I thought she might be able to hear it. I forced a small smile, the kind people used to keep from crying. "Hi, sweetheart," I managed. I came to see my grandson." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "You drove all the way here. Uninvited?" "I just wanted to." I began, clutching the small blue-wrapped box in my hand. But before I could finish, she shifted her weight, crossing her arms over her chest. "This isn't a good time." The words hit me like a slap. I looked past her shoulder, desperate to see any glimpse of the boy. Just one little peek of him would have been enough. But the hallway behind her was empty, quiet, spotless. I swallowed hard and tried again, softer this time. "I didn't come to cause trouble. I just want to see him. That's all. Just to say hello." She didn't budge. She didn't even open the door all the way. "You can't just show up here," she said flatly. I almost laughed, though there was nothing funny about it. "I know I should have called," I whispered. "But if I had called, would you have let me see him?" She didn't answer that. She just stared at me, her jaw tightening. And in that silence, I already knew what the answer was. I could feel the sting building in the back of my throat, but I forced myself to keep my chin up. I wasn't going to let her see me cry on her doorstep like some stranger. Before either of us could say anything else, I heard footsteps behind her. Heavy, familiar. And then he appeared. My son. He stepped into the doorway, standing behind his wife. For a second, the world went quiet. I hadn't seen him in person since before the baby was born. His hair was shorter now. There were faint lines near his eyes. But those eyes, I knew them as well as my own. For a heartbeat, I thought he'd push past her, wrap me in his arms and tell me everything was going to be okay. I thought the years of silence might disappear with just one hug. But he didn't move forward. He just looked at me like he wasn't sure how to feel. "Mom," he said quietly. Not warm. Not cold. Just distant. I tried to smile, but it trembled. "Hi, sweetheart." His wife shifted slightly, like she didn't want him getting too close. "You should have called," he said. "I know," I whispered. "I know, honey. But I just wanted to see you. To see him." He glanced at the little box in my hand, then back at me. His jaw clenched the same way it used to when he was upset as a boy, except now he was a grown man, and I wasn't sure if my love was enough to soften him anymore. "It's just not a good time right now," he said. I laughed softly, bitterly. "I drove 1,000 miles to get here. I've been in this car for 2 days. I just want 5 minutes." He looked at his wife. That look told me everything. This wasn't just his decision. "We're not ready for this," she said, stepping forward slightly. Ready for what? For his mother. For a grandmother who'd raised him on her own? For someone who still kept his 3rd grade drawing folded in a drawer like treasure? The door was still only half open. My son wasn't moving. She wasn't moving. And I could feel the moment slipping away like sand between my fingers. Then from somewhere deep inside the house I heard it. A small voice. "Daddy." My heart stopped. That voice. His voice. A little boy's footsteps pattered against the wooden floor, coming closer. He was just out of sight, but I could hear him. I could hear my grandson. I leaned forward ever so slightly, trying to catch a glimpse. But before he could reach the door, his mother stepped back inside and closed it a little more, blocking the view completely. "Who's that?" I heard the boy ask, his voice light and curious. "Just someone," she said. Someone. That word sliced deeper than anything else. I wanted to shout. I wanted to say, "I'm not someone. I'm your grandmother. I was there when your father was born. I held him when he cried. I loved him through everything." But my lips wouldn't move. My son didn't say anything. He just stood there, trapped between 2 worlds, the one he came from and the one he'd built. "Please," I whispered. "Just let me see him. Just one hello. That's all I want." But my daughter-in-law shook her head slightly. "This isn't how it works. Not anymore." And then slowly, painfully, the door began to close. My son didn't stop it. I stood on the front step, the toy car still clutched in my hand, watching the door click shut in my face. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just stood there, staring at that red door like it might open again if I waited long enough. But it didn't. The sun was lower now, shadows stretching across the yard. The perfect little neighborhood around me carried on like nothing had happened. A woman jogged by with a stroller. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. Life kept moving. But for me, time had stopped. I stepped back slowly, the gravel crunching under my shoes. I didn't know whether to knock again or run back to my car and drive the 1,000 miles home. Instead, I just whispered to the closed door, "I'm not giving up on you. Not again." And then I turned and walked down those steps. Not away from him, but not toward him either. Stuck somewhere in the middle. Just like my son. I don't remember walking back to the car. I only remember the weight in my chest, like someone had reached in and pulled something out of me I couldn't get back. The world around me felt muffled, like I was underwater. My hand was still clutching the little wrapped box, my knuckles pale against the blue paper. I sank into the driver's seat and stared at the house through the windshield. For a long time I didn't move. I just sat there watching that red door. I thought about knocking again. I thought about yelling. I thought about begging. But instead I just whispered, "I drove 1,000 miles for this?" My heart kept replaying the moment his little voice floated through the doorway. "Daddy." That tiny voice, the one I'd imagined hearing for so many years, was real. He was right there, just a few steps away, and I couldn't even see him. Not even for a second. The porch light flicked on as the sun dipped below the tree line. I stayed there long enough to see my son pull the blinds closed. That small, deliberate movement felt like a wall being built in front of me. A final line drawn in the sand. I leaned my head against the steering wheel and exhaled, shaky and broken. I had told myself I was prepared for anything. I wasn't. My mind drifted back to the night everything fell apart. I can still see my son standing in my kitchen with that same distant look in his eyes. His fiancée sitting stiffly at the table. We'd fought about money, about the wedding. I'd said things I can never take back. "You're making a mistake," I'd told him, not because I hated her, but because I didn't trust how fast everything was moving. But he'd heard something else. A rejection. That night he'd packed his things and said, "Mom, you've made this too hard." We didn't speak for months. When the baby was born, I got a text message with a photo and nothing else. I sent gifts, cards, messages, no answer. Year after year, I watched my grandson grow through blurry Facebook pictures and holiday posts I wasn't tagged in. and still I held on to hope. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. The night air was cooling down, crisp against my skin as I cracked the window open. Across the street, porch lights glowed softly, neighbors living their quiet lives. I wondered if any of them knew how close I was to breaking. A movement at the window caught my attention. My daughter-in-law stood behind the curtain for a second, just watching. I don't know if she saw the pain on my face. I don't even know if she cared. Then she let the curtain fall back into place. I whispered to myself, she doesn't want me here. But he did once. My son used to call me every day after work. He used to drive over for dinner just because he missed home cooking. I used to be the person he leaned on. Now, I was standing on the outside of his life looking in. Something inside me hardened. I wasn't leaving. Not yet. I didn't drive 1,000 miles to let a closed door send me back. I turned off the engine and grabbed the blanket from the back seat. If I had to sleep in this car tonight, then that's what I'd do. Tomorrow I'd try again. But as I lay there wrapped in that old blanket, memories crept in whether I wanted them to or not. I remembered the day I brought him home from the hospital, just the two of us. His tiny hand wrapped around my finger. I promised him that night that no matter how hard life got, I'd always be there for him. I remembered his first day of kindergarten. He'd been terrified, clutching my legs so tightly I had to peel him off to get him inside. I'd stood outside that classroom door, listening to him cry, telling myself it was for the best, that he'd be okay. And I remembered the night of his high school graduation. He'd hugged me and said, "You did it, Mom. We made it." Somewhere along the way, that little boy disappeared into a man I barely recognized. I closed my eyes trying to silence the ache in my chest. But then a sound. A door creaked open. Not a front door. A side door. I sat up blinking in the dark. Through the windshield, I saw a figure stepping out of the house quietly. My son. He walked down the driveway and stood by the trash cans, glancing around like he didn't want to be seen. For a second I thought he was going to walk over to me. My heart raced. I reached for the door handle ready to get out, but he didn't move closer. He just stood there, rubbing the back of his neck, then finally tossed a bag in the bin and walked back inside. I watched the side door close softly. He'd seen my car. I knew he had, but he hadn't said a word. I slumped back into the seat, tears spilling silently down my cheeks. It wasn't just rejection I felt, it was something worse. Distance. A distance that had grown so wide between us that even 1,000 miles on the road couldn't bridge it. I hugged the toy car to my chest, whispering to it like it could hear me. "I just want to see you, baby boy. That's all." The night grew colder, and my breath fogged the glass. A dog barked somewhere down the street. A sprinkler hissed to life on the neighbor's lawn. The world didn't care about my heartbreak. But tomorrow would come. And tomorrow I'd try again. I didn't know how. I didn't know what I'd say. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't leaving until I saw my grandson, even if it broke me. The next morning came slower than any morning I can remember. My neck ached from sleeping in the driver's seat, and the blanket had slipped to the floor sometime during the night. The sun was already up, streaking across the quiet suburban street like it was any other ordinary day. But to me it wasn't. This wasn't just a road trip anymore. It wasn't just a visit. It was my last chance. I fixed my hair as best as I could in the rearview mirror, though nothing could really hide the exhaustion on my face. My eyes were red, puffy from crying. I told myself to stop looking like someone who'd been pushed out of her own family. I needed to look strong, calm, steady, like a mother who hadn't given up. I stepped out of the car and stood on the sidewalk, staring at the red door again. It looked exactly the same as last night, perfect, unwelcoming. I wanted to turn around. I wanted to get in the car, drive home, and pretend none of this had happened. But I couldn't. I hadn't driven 1,000 miles for a door to tell me no. I walked toward the house slowly, my feet crunching on the gravel. My heart beat louder with every step. I climbed the porch and raised my hand. But before I could knock, the door opened. He was standing there. My son. This time without his wife. For a second it was just the two of us, no barriers, no blinds, no silence. His hair was messy like he hadn't slept well. His t-shirt was wrinkled. He looked more like the boy I used to know. "Mom," he said softly, as if he wasn't sure he was allowed to. I took a shaky breath. Good morning, sweetheart. He leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms over his chest, a small shield. He wasn't angry. He wasn't warm either. Just caught somewhere in between. You shouldn't have slept in your car, he said quietly. I almost laughed, but it came out as more of a shaky exhale. Well, it's not like I had anywhere else to go. He looked down at the porch for a long time, his jaw tight. I could see the weight on his shoulders. It was the same look he had the night he left home all those years ago. Why didn't you call, Mom? He asked finally. Because I was afraid you'd say no. Because hearing no on the phone would have hurt less than seeing it in person. Because if you'd told me not to come, I still would have driven here anyway. I didn't say any of that. I just whispered. Because I missed you. And because I needed to see my grandson. His face softened for just a moment. Flicker. A glimpse of the boy who used to hug me after soccer practice and say, "Love you, Mom." Like it was the easiest thing in the world. But then the flicker faded. Yesterday wasn't okay, he said carefully. You showing up like that. You can't just walk back into our lives without. Without what? I cut in, the tremble in my voice betraying me. Without asking permission to love my own grandson? Mom, that's not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying? He pressed his fingers to his forehead, like he was trying to piece the right words together. This is complicated. I laughed softly, bitterly. Yeah, honey. Life usually is. There was a pause. Then a sound behind him, small, fast footsteps. My breath caught in my throat. And then he appeared. My grandson. He peeked out from behind his father's leg, his little face half hidden, his big brown eyes curious and cautious all at once. He had my son's eyes. Exactly the same. My knees almost buckled when I saw him. I'd spent years imagining this moment. I'd imagined hugging him, lifting him, spinning him around like I used to with his daddy. But now that he was here, I couldn't move. I was terrified that if I stepped forward, someone would take him away again. Hey, buddy, my son said softly to him, placing a hand on his shoulder. The little boy looked at me. Just looked. He didn't say a word. I forced a small smile, holding out the blue box with shaky hands. Hi, sweetheart. I'm Mom, my son interrupted, his voice low. I stopped. The boy tilted his head, curious but shy. His father knelt down and whispered something in his ear. I couldn't hear what. The little boy nodded slowly. He looked at me again. Who are you? He asked in a tiny voice. The words hit me like a punch I never saw coming. I opened my mouth, but the answer stuck in my throat. I wanted to say, I'm your grandmother. I was there when your daddy was your age. I've loved you since before you could even speak. But my voice came out too small. I'm a friend of your daddy's, I whispered. It wasn't the truth, but it was all I could get out without breaking down. His tiny brow furrowed, and then, just as quickly as he appeared, my daughter-in-law's voice echoed from inside the house. Come inside, honey. The little boy turned and ran back toward the sound without another word. The door wasn't closed yet, but it might as well have been. My son stood there watching me. I could see the storm behind his calm expression. He was torn. I knew that look because it used to be me, torn between being strong and being scared. You can't do this to me, I whispered. You can't keep me out of his life. He's my grandson. His jaw clenched. And he's my son. The air between us was thick. Too many years of unsaid things pressing down on both of us. I could feel my heart tearing in two. I'm not asking to take anything from you, I said. I just want to love him. That's it. I just want him to know I exist. He looked down again. He didn't answer. His wife appeared in the doorway, her hand resting on his shoulder like a silent command. She didn't say a word to me, just gave me a look that said enough. And slowly, quietly, my son stepped back inside the house. The door closed. Again. I stood there, the sound of the latch clicking echoing in my ears like the shattering of glass. This time the toy car was still in my hand. I hadn't even gotten the chance to give it to him. I walked back to my car slowly. The world around me moving like it belonged to someone else. The wind brushed my hair, the birds chirped, the neighbors watered their lawns. It was a perfect morning for everyone else. But for me it felt like a door I might never be allowed to open. I sat in the car, gripping the little box, whispering to myself. He looked at me. At least he looked at me. And then with my heart breaking all over again, I stared at that red door and promised myself this wasn't over. I don't know what hurt more, the biting cold of the porch or the hollow silence inside that house I used to know so well. My legs ached from the long drive, my heart burned from the rejection, and still I sat there, staring at the front door as if it might magically open. I wanted to believe my daughter-in-law would come back out, that my son would appear and say it had all been a mistake. But the lights inside dimmed and no one came. The porch light clicked off. I was just a shadow on the steps of my son's house, a stranger outside a home I once helped build. I finally dragged myself to the car, my breath fogging up the windshield as I sat there in silence. I could still see the nursery I helped decorate, the baby shower I attended, the first little shoes I bought. I thought I'd be grandma, not the woman locked out. I started the car, but my hands gripped the steering wheel so tight they hurt. I didn't drive away. Not yet. Something inside me whispered, this isn't over. I opened my glove compartment and pulled out the tiny photo I carried with me. My grandson's first birthday. The way he smiled when he saw me, as if he recognized my soul. I couldn't just disappear from his life. No matter what my son and his wife thought of me, I wasn't going to vanish like a ghost. The next morning, I checked into a small motel a few miles away. The woman at the front desk handed me a key with a kind smile. "You visiting family?" she asked. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Trying to," I whispered. The room smelled like coffee and old carpet. But it was warm, and I needed warmth more than anything. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, playing every conversation with my son in my head. Where did it go wrong? I raised him with everything I had. I was a single mother who worked double shifts just to put food on the table and give him a decent life. I was there for every scraped knee, every broken heart, every dream. And now I was being treated like some unwanted stranger. By mid-afternoon, I found myself driving back near the neighborhood. I didn't get close enough to seem intrusive. I just sat at a distance in a grocery store parking lot, watching the house from afar. I hated how it made me feel, but something told me this wasn't just about me. That night, I picked up my phone and texted my son. "I came a long way to see you and my grandson. I'm not leaving without talking to you." The message delivered. Then nothing. But at midnight my phone buzzed. His reply was short. "Mom, this isn't a good time. Please just go back home." I stared at those words, my chest tightening. Not a good time. He hadn't seen me in nearly a year. How could there ever be a good time if he kept pushing me away? I typed back with shaking fingers. "I'm staying nearby. We need to talk. Please." He didn't reply again. But I didn't cry this time. Something inside me shifted. I'd spent too long walking on eggshells to avoid making things worse. I'd sacrificed my voice to keep peace. But now I had nothing left to lose. The next morning, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years, his father's sister. My ex-husband's family had always been distant after the divorce, but my sister-in-law had loved my boy deeply when he was young. She picked up on the second ring. "Mary," she said, surprised. "Hi, Ellen," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I'm in town. I need to talk to you about Jason." Within an hour we were sitting in a diner booth, coffee between us. Ellen still had that soft, no-nonsense way about her. I told her everything, the drive, the door, the rejection. She listened without interrupting, and for the first time in days I didn't feel completely alone. When I finished, she sighed. "Mary, I've heard things. Jason's wife, she's controlling. She's cut off a lot of people, even some of her own family. I thought it was just distance, but..." My heart thudded. "So it's not just me?" Ellen shook her head slowly. "No, I think Jason's stuck. But that boy loves you. I know he does. He wouldn't be like this unless something was going on behind the scenes." I didn't know whether to feel relieved or terrified. Ellen squeezed my hand. "Let me talk to him. Maybe hearing from someone else will make him listen." I nodded, but deep down I knew it would take more than just a talk. This was about reclaiming my place in my grandson's life, in my son's heart, and I wasn't going to fade quietly into the night. That evening, I sat at the motel desk with a notebook in front of me. I started writing. Not a letter of anger or guilt, but a letter of truth. I wrote to my son as the woman who raised him, not the stranger he'd turned away. Every memory, every sacrifice, Every piece of love I'd poured into his life spilled onto those pages. And at the end I wrote, "I'm not here to fight you. I'm here to remind you that family doesn't vanish when things get hard. I'm here because I love you. And I love my grandson. I will always be his grandmother." The next step would change everything. I wasn't just going to beg at a door anymore. I was going to be heard. One way or another. This was no longer just about being a mother. It was about standing up for love. For truth. For family. And this time, I wasn't backing down. The next morning, I woke up before the sun had even begun to warm the motel's faded curtains. The letter I'd written the night before lay folded neatly on the nightstand. My words to my son, raw and unpolished but real. For years I'd chosen silence over confrontation, but silence had only built a wall between us. That wall had grown high enough to shut me out of my grandson's life. I made a cup of motel coffee, the kind that tasted like burnt water, and sat at the small wooden table, staring at that letter. Part of me was terrified to hand it over. Another part of me, the part that had raised a boy on her own and survived worse storms, felt steady. This was my truth. By 9 a.m., Ellen picked me up in her old SUV. She looked determined, like she'd been waiting for this chance too. "Jason's home," she said. "I called him this morning. I told him I was coming by." My chest tightened. "Did you tell him I'd be there?" She shook her head. "No. I thought it'd be better if he saw you himself. No more running." The drive felt longer than the 1,000 miles I'd already traveled. When we pulled up to the house, I could see the blinds shift. Someone inside had noticed us. "Mary," Ellen said softly, placing a hand on mine, "no matter what happens, he knows you're here. That matters." I nodded, clutching the letter in my trembling fingers. Ellen rang the doorbell, and for a moment there was only silence. Then the door cracked open. It was my son, my boy, standing there with tired eyes and a hesitant expression, as if seeing me at his doorstep was a test he didn't know how to pass. "Mom," he said quietly, stepping outside. I couldn't help it. My throat tightened. For a second, I saw not the man in front of me but the little boy who used to run into my arms after school. "Jason," I whispered. He didn't invite me in. But at least he didn't shut the door this time. That was something. Ellen cleared her throat gently. "I'll wait in the car," she said, giving me a knowing look. She stepped away, leaving the two of us on the front porch. "I didn't know you were coming," he said. "I texted," I reminded him. "I drove 1,000 miles, Jason. I just wanted to see you. To see my grandson." He rubbed the back of his neck, a nervous habit he'd had since he was a boy. "This isn't a good time." I felt that familiar sting in my chest, but I didn't let it show this time. "Jason," I said firmly, "you've been saying that for a long time. When will it ever be a good time?" His eyes darted toward the door. I could hear faint voices inside, her voice. She was listening. I took a small step forward. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm not here to judge you or your wife. I'm here because I love you. And because I love that little boy inside that house." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. I held out the folded letter. "Please, just read this. If after that you still don't want me in your lives, I'll leave. But at least hear me out once. Not through text, not through silence. Just hear your mother." Jason stared at the letter like it weighed 100 pounds. Slowly he reached out and took it. I could see the battle in his eyes. He wasn't angry, he was scared. Scared of confrontation. Scared of choosing sides. Maybe even scared of facing what he'd let happen. "Jason," I said softly, "I raised you to be kind. To stand up for what's right. But lately you've been shutting out the people who love you the most. I can take being hurt. But your son shouldn't grow up thinking family is something you can just lock out." His jaw tightened. "It's not that simple, Mom." "Yes, it is," I whispered. "Love isn't complicated, Jason. People make it complicated." A small hand suddenly pressed against the glass door. I turned and my heart skipped. My grandson, my beautiful sweet boy, was peeking through the window, his little palm flat against the glass. His big brown eyes lit up when they met mine. "Is that him?" I asked softly. Jason turned too. His face softened just a little. "Yeah," he murmured. I took a shaky breath. "That's why I'm here. Not to fight. To love him. To be in his life. To be his grandmother. The door behind him creaked and she appeared, my daughter-in-law. She crossed her arms, her eyes sharp as glass. Jason, she said tightly. We talked about this. Jason froze between us. I saw the old fear in him, the kind I thought he'd outgrow. But this time I didn't back down. I stepped forward, my voice steady. I'm not here to cause a scene. I'm here as his mother and his son's grandmother. I will not beg on the porch like a stranger ever again. Her lips pressed into a thin line, but I didn't waver. Jason looked at me, then at her. The moment stretched out like a string pulled tight. Finally, he said quietly, "Can I have a moment with her?" She stiffened but stepped back inside, letting the door close behind her. For the first time it was just me and him. "Jason," I whispered, "please don't let your son grow up thinking love has conditions." His eyes shone with something, guilt, pain, maybe even longing. He nodded slowly. "I'll read the letter." I exhaled shakily, feeling my knees weaken with both relief and fear. As I walked back toward Ellen's car, I didn't know how this story would end. But something was different. I wasn't standing outside in silence anymore. I had been heard. And sometimes that's where change begins. That night, I lay awake in the motel bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling as the neon sign from the parking lot flickered against the curtains. My body was exhausted from the emotional weight of the day, but my mind was alive with every detail of my son's face on that porch, the way his hands shook when he took my letter, the way his eyes softened when he saw his little boy looking at me through the glass. For the first time in a long time, I felt a small spark of something I thought I'd lost, hope. I kept replaying that tiny moment, that childlike face pressing against the glass, his little fingers splayed wide as if reaching for something familiar. He didn't know the pain between the adults. All he saw was someone who loved him deeply, and that, more than anything, gave me strength. I must have drifted off sometime before dawn, because when I woke up, the light was spilling through the curtains and my phone was buzzing on the nightstand. I reached over, my heart pounding as I saw his name on the screen. Jason. For a second, my fingers hovered above the screen. Then I answered. "Mom." His voice came softly, like he'd been up all night too. I read your letter." I held my breath. He didn't rush his words. "I don't know how to explain everything. But things haven't been easy. Not here. Not between me and her." His voice cracked slightly on the last word. She doesn't want anyone interfering with how we raise him. She says it's our life. But it's not just that. I've let things happen. I didn't speak up when I should have. I closed my eyes, tears gathering but not falling. "Jason, all I ever wanted was to love you. To love my grandson. That's it. I'm not trying to control anything." "I know," he said quietly. "I know that now." The line went silent for a moment. I could hear him breathing. "Can we meet?" he finally asked. My heart leapt into my throat. "Yes. Of course. Not here," he added. "At the park near the elementary school. You remember the one?" I did. It was the same park I used to take him to when he was just a little boy, where he learned to ride his first bike. "I'll be there," I whispered. When I pulled up to the park later that morning, the autumn leaves crunched beneath my shoes as I stepped out of the car. The air was crisp, and the old swings creaked in the breeze. Felt like stepping back in time. Then I saw him, Jason, walking toward me holding my grandson's tiny hand. The little boy toddled beside him, wearing a bright red jacket and a smile that nearly broke me in half. "Grandma!" He squealed as if he'd been waiting all along. I froze, the word hitting me like a wave of warmth and pain and love all at once. It had been so long since I'd heard anyone call me that. I dropped to my knees and he ran straight into my arms. His little arms wrapped around my neck, and all the sleepless nights, the miles I drove, the cold porch, it all faded in that one perfect moment. Jason stood a few feet away, hands in his jacket pockets, watching us. He looked tired but different, softer, less guarded. "He remembers you," Jason said quietly. "He used to point at the photos." I held my grandson close, breathing him in like a prayer I'd finally been allowed to say. "He's grown so much," I whispered. We sat down on a nearby bench while my grandson played on the slide. Jason sat next to me, his hands clasped together. "I know I hurt you," he began. His voice was raw, unfiltered. "I know I've pushed you away. I thought I was protecting my family, but all I was doing was tearing it apart. Jason, I said gently, I never wanted to be between you and her. I just wanted to be a part of your life. Part of his life. That's all. He nodded slowly. She's strong-willed. And I let her set all the rules. I thought keeping the peace was better than fighting. But I didn't realize I was choosing silence over the people who raised me. My throat tightened. I just needed you to choose love, Jason. Not sides. Love. He leaned back, his eyes following his son on the playground. She doesn't want a relationship with you. I can't force that. But I also can't keep you out of his life anymore. You deserve to know him. And he deserves to know you. The weight of those words sank deep. For the first time, he wasn't defending anyone. He was standing up. Thank you, I whispered. He turned to me, his jaw tense but his eyes glassy. I'm sorry, Mom, for making you feel like a stranger. For making you drive 1,000 miles to be turned away at a door you helped build. I'll never forget that night. Tears spilled down my cheeks, warm against the cold air. Jason, I'd drive 1,000 more if it meant hearing those words. The little boy came running back to me with a leaf in his tiny hand. For you, Grandma. I took it like it was the most precious gift in the world. Jason exhaled deeply. We'll have to take it slow. She won't be happy. But I'm done pretending this isn't important. You're his grandmother. That matters. The wind rustled the trees and I felt something in me loosen. A knot that had been there for too long. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But at that moment, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was no longer standing on the outside. I was part of his world again. And that was worth everything. I stayed at that park longer than I expected. My grandson's laughter filled the crisp autumn air like music I hadn't heard in years. Every giggle, every clumsy run across the playground, every tiny hand reaching for mine. It all felt like sunlight pouring through cracks in a cold, dark room. I had spent so long feeling like a ghost, like someone who no longer belonged. But in that moment I felt alive. Jason sat on the bench across from me, quiet, lost in thought. I knew the weight he carried. I could see it in the way his shoulders slumped and how his hands fidgeted with the zipper of his jacket. He wasn't just battling with me. He was battling with himself. As the sun started to dip, Jason finally broke the silence. I don't know what's going to happen after this, he admitted softly. But I know one thing. I can't keep shutting you out. It's not fair to you. And it's not fair to him. I turned my gaze toward my grandson, watching him chase after a leaf like it was the most important mission in the world. I don't need everything to be perfect, Jason, I said quietly. I just need a chance to be in his life. To love him. To make memories with him like I did with you. Jason's eyes glistened in the fading light. You were a good mom, he whispered. I didn't say it enough growing up, but you were. You did everything for me. The words hit me like a soft hammer. Not painful but powerful. For years I'd carried the fear that maybe he'd forgotten all the nights I stayed up with him, the sacrifices I made, the birthdays I spent saving pennies just to give him a piece of joy. But he hadn't forgotten. He just buried it. I reached over and touched his hand. Thank you, Jason. That means more than you know. He cleared his throat, looking down. I don't want my son to grow up thinking family is disposable. I want him to know where he comes from. That was the Jason I raised. Just as we were about to leave, I saw her, my daughter-in-law, standing at the edge of the parking lot. She wasn't smiling. Her arms were folded tightly across her chest, her jaw set. Jason stiffened immediately when he saw her. Here we go, he muttered under his breath. She started walking toward us, her heels clicking on the pavement like a warning. My stomach knotted, but I stood my ground. This wasn't about a fight. This was about love. Jason, she said sharply, ignoring me completely. Can I talk to you? He glanced at me, then at her. We're talking now, he replied evenly. Her eyes narrowed. I asked you not to do this. Jason straightened his shoulders. You asked me to cut my own mother out of my life. That's not the same thing. The wind caught her hair as her face hardened. I don't want drama. I don't want anyone interfering. We have rules. Rules that don't include my family, he interrupted. Rules that make my son grow up without knowing his grandmother. Her gaze flicked to me for the first time. There was no warmth in her eyes, just cold calculation. "We don't need this, Jason," she hissed. "We're fine on our own." Jason's jaw clenched, but he didn't back down. "No, we're not. We're not fine. We're fractured, and it's because I've been letting your fear control my family." "Not anymore." The silence between them was sharp and heavy. My heart pounded, but I kept my voice steady when I finally spoke. "I'm not here to take anything from you," I said to her calmly. "I don't want to control how you raise your child. I just want to love my grandson. That's it. I'm not your enemy." She looked like she wanted to argue, but Jason stepped forward. "This isn't up for debate anymore. She's his grandmother. She's staying in his life. That's my decision." Something flickered in her eyes then. Not acceptance, but the realization that Jason wasn't going to bend this time. For years he'd avoided conflict. I knew my son. I knew the way he shrank to keep the peace. But not now. Not today. "Fine," she snapped. "But don't expect me to like it." She turned to walk away, but Jason called after her. "You don't have to like it. You just have to respect it." I watched her retreat to the car, her back stiff, her emotions unreadable. For the first time, Jason turned back to me, exhaling like he'd been holding that breath for years. "I've never stood up to her like that," he admitted. I placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "I know. And I'm proud of you." He looked at me, really looked at me, and in his eyes I saw my boy again. The one who used to believe I could fix anything just by holding him. My grandson came running over, oblivious to the storm that had just passed, his little cheeks pink from the wind. "Grandma, look," he said, holding up a small acorn like it was treasure. I smiled, my heart full. "That's beautiful, sweetheart." Jason watched us, a small weary smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "We've got a long road ahead," he said softly. I nodded. "But at least we're walking it together now." The sun dipped below the trees, casting a golden glow over the park. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't on the outside looking in. I was right where I belonged, by my grandson's side, with my son finally standing beside me. And no matter what battles came next, I knew one thing for sure. Love had finally found its voice again. The weeks that followed were a mixture of cautious steps and small victories. I stayed nearby, checking in with Jason daily, slowly regaining my place in my grandson's life. Every visit was a careful negotiation with his wife. She made her displeasure clear with clipped remarks and icy glares, but Jason had finally found his voice. He didn't argue, but he didn't fold either. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't battling alone. My grandson, oblivious to the tension, thrived on the attention. He ran to me whenever he saw me, his small hands reaching for mine. We built Lego towers, chased him around the yard, and read bedtime stories over video calls when I couldn't be there in person. Each day he learned that his grandmother loved him unconditionally, that he had a place in this world where he was safe and adored. Jason and I started talking more openly, too. We shared memories from his childhood, the holidays, birthdays, the small victories, and the big mistakes. It wasn't easy at first. Years of distance had left scars, and both of us carried guilt and anger. But with every conversation, the walls started to crumble. One afternoon while we were at the park again, Jason's son ran ahead to the swings, laughing and calling my name. I watched him play, and Jason sat beside me on the bench, hands clasped together, his usual tension softened. "I never realized how much I was letting her control everything," he said quietly. "I thought I was protecting my family, but I was keeping you out. Now, I see what I was missing." I nodded, my throat tight. "It's not about control, Jason. It's about love. And love can't be restricted by fear or anger. You've got to choose it every day." He looked at me, and I saw the boy I raised looking back through the man he'd become. "I'm choosing it now," he whispered. That night, when I drove back to the motel, I felt a quiet satisfaction that I hadn't known in years. I still had a lot to repair. Trust wasn't rebuilt in a day. But I had hope, and that hope felt like a lifeline. The next morning Jason called. "Mom, I've decided," he said. His voice was steady, resolved. "We're having dinner with you tonight. No arguments. No rules about who can or can't come. I want my son to have his grandmother in his life. And I want us to start fresh." Tears pricked my eyes. I'd love that, I said softly, my voice breaking. That evening, I arrived at their house with a sense of cautious optimism. My grandson ran to greet me at the door, and I scooped him up in a hug that felt like coming home. Jason followed behind, holding the door open and smiling. A genuine, unguarded smile that I hadn't seen in years. We sat down to dinner together. It wasn't perfect, there were awkward pauses, and I caught a few sharp glances from his wife, but it was a start. My grandson chattered happily, telling stories about school and the playground. I listened, laughed, and joined in, feeling like I was finally back in the fold. As we cleared the dishes, Jason leaned closer. Mom, I don't want to lose this again. I don't want him to grow up thinking family is something that comes and goes. You've been patient even when I wasn't. I need to do better. I reached for his hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. You already are, Jason. Just keep choosing love. That's all it takes. For the first time since I drove those 1,000 miles, I felt at peace. I had been blocked at the door, yes, but I hadn't been stopped. Love had found a way through the cracks, slowly but surely. My grandson had me in his life, my son had remembered the value of family, and I knew that no matter what battles lay ahead, we would face them together. That night, I left their house with a full heart. I had driven 1,000 miles for this moment, and it had been worth every mile, every tear, every bit of fear. I had fought for my family, and now finally I had my place back. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but love, real unbreakable love, had already won the first battle. The weeks turned into months, and slowly, our lives began to settle into a new rhythm. I wasn't just a visitor anymore. I was part of my grandson's daily world. Weekends were spent at the park, afternoons at the library, and quiet evenings with bedtime stories over FaceTime when I couldn't be there in person. Every laugh, every hug, every whispered "Grandma" stitched a bond stronger than any distance, stronger than any door that had once kept me out. Jason had changed too. The tension that had always shadowed his presence was fading. He wasn't perfect, and we still had disagreements, moments where the past collided with the present, but he was present. He was a father who made sure his son knew the love of both sides of his family. And in his eyes, I saw the boy I had raised, finally at peace with the mother who had never stopped loving him. There were still difficult moments with his wife. She made it clear she wasn't thrilled with my presence, and at first it stung. But Jason stood firm, calmly and respectfully, setting boundaries that protected our relationship without escalating tension. And eventually she began to accept that I wasn't going anywhere, though she would never admit it outright. One chilly Saturday morning, we took my grandson to the park near our old neighborhood. The swings creaked under him as he pumped his little legs back and forth, laughter spilling into the crisp air. I sat on a bench nearby watching him, and Jason joined me, wrapping an arm around my shoulder. "Thank you, Mom," he said softly, his breath fogging in the cold air. "For not giving up. For driving all that way. For everything." I shook my head, smiling through tears I didn't bother to hide. I didn't do it for thanks. I did it because I had to. Love doesn't wait for permission. He squeezed my shoulder gently, and we sat in silence for a moment, watching the boy who had unknowingly united us all. The weight of the past, the heartbreak, the closed doors, they felt lighter now, like the sun had finally burned through a long, relentless fog. Later, as we walked hand in hand to the car, my grandson skipped ahead, turning to wave at me. "Grandma!" he shouted. "Race you!" I laughed, chasing after him, and Jason followed, a smile lighting up his face. That laughter, unguarded, pure, joyful, was the sound of healing. The sound of family reclaimed. That night I sat in my hotel room, reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. The 1,000 miles, the rejection, the fear, the tears, every step had led to this. I realized that love, the kind that lasts, requires courage. Courage to stand at the door even when it's closed, courage to fight for the bonds that matter most, and courage to forgive, even when hearts have been bruised. I folded my hands over my chest and whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude. I had my grandson. I had my son. And though life would continue to challenge us, I knew this. Family isn't measured in distance or doors slammed in your face. Family is measured in love that refuses to let go. And now, after all the miles, all the pain, all the fear, I was finally home. After months of struggle, tears, and uncertainty, I finally found my place in my grandson's life. The doors that were once closed are now open. Not because anyone gave me permission, but because love refuses to be ignored. My story is proof that no matter how far you've been pushed away, it's never too late to fight for family. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs hope today. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more real-life stories that inspire, shock, and touch the heart. Your family, your love, your courage, they're worth every mile.